Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark.
If anyone finds this, do not come here.
Karolynn's voice came through the speaker in a shredded whisper, warped like it had been dragged through gravel. The footage on screen shook violently. Sky smeared into gray static, trees bending wrong, the camera swinging as if the person holding it couldn't stand upright.
Chainsaw Hill isn't abandoned,
Karolynn said again, breath hitching.
It's waiting.
The image bucked. A sharp, wet sound. Someone sobbing too hard to breathe. Then the camera dropped and the world tilted sideways into mud and dead leaves. Far away, a chainsaw revved. Not loud, not close. Just wrong, like something breathing through metal. Then the screen cut to black. 3 days earlier, Karolynn loved the first moment a place revealed itself to the camera. It was always better through the lens, more honest somehow. The world became a frame, and everything inside it felt like it had to mean something. She stood at the edge of the road with her camera lifted, filming the crooked sign half swallowed by weeds. Chainsaw Hill. No trespassing. Below it, someone had scratched fresh letters into the wood with something sharp. Keep driving. Behind her, Otis popped the trunk and fished out his backpack like he'd done this 100 times. He was all sharp angles and restless energy, his hair falling into his eyes as he unfolded a map that looked older than the road itself. King leaned against their car, scanning the tree line like he expected it to blink. "Tell me you got that," Otis said. Karolynn angled the camera toward him. "Got it, and I'm keeping it in." King's mouth twitched like he wanted to smile but couldn't quite commit. "This is the part where we turn around." Otis scoffed. "This is the part where people like us don't." Karolynn zoomed in on the letters carved into the sign. The gouges were pale and raw, as if the wood had been cut minutes ago. But the road was empty. No cars, no birds, not even the whine of distant traffic. Just the hush of trees and the thick, damp smell of soil that hadn't seen sunlight in a long time. "Okay," Karolynn murmured, mostly to herself, voice slipping into her filming tone. Calm, documentary smooth. We're about 15 minutes outside Bryer County, and according to locals, Chainsaw Hill is an abandoned settlement that doesn't show up on most modern maps. There have been 6 disappearances, Otis supplied immediately. 7, if you count the guy they found without his boots. King straightened. Don't count that one. Karolynn swung the camera toward him. Why not? King didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed locked on the fog gathered between the trees, thin as gauze, too early in the day for it. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "Because it wasn't fog when I looked the first time." Karolynn's throat tightened. She almost lowered the camera. Almost. Otis stepped onto the road like he could bully the world into behaving. "Come on, town's just ahead." They walked forward together, gravel crunching under their shoes. The fog slid across the road like something alive, parting for them, letting them through. And as Karolynn filmed the first broken rooftops emerging in the haze, silent buildings leaning toward each other like they were sharing secrets, she realized something that made her skin go cold. Chainsaw Hill didn't look abandoned. It looked paused, like everyone had been here a moment ago. And somewhere deeper in the town, something metallic clinked softly once, twice, as if a tool had been set down. Karolynn kept filming even when every instinct in her body told her to stop. The town opened up in front of them like a mouth. A main street, if you could call it that, ran between buildings that leaned at odd angles, their windows dark and blank. The fog didn't roll like normal fog. It hovered, it clung. It held itself in place as if it had weight. Otis walked ahead, map out, turning in slow circles like the paper might suddenly tell the truth if he stared hard enough. "This is insane," he muttered. It's not even on the county survey records. Not even as a burned-out settlement. It's like it got erased. King didn't respond. He was watching the storefronts, the narrow alleys, the gaps between buildings where the fog thickened into something almost solid. Karolynn's camera picked up details her eyes kept skipping over. A child's tricycle, rusted, parked perfectly upright on the sidewalk. A mailbox with the red flag lifted, as if someone had just sent a letter and expected it to be collected. A row of boot prints pressed into mud near the curb, fresh enough that water still glistened in the indentations. Karolynn paused on the prints, zooming in. "Guys," she said softly. Otis leaned over, squinting. "Those are..." "Barefoot," King finished. Karolynn swallowed. The prints didn't look like someone walking. They looked like someone standing. Like they'd been planted there and held, weight pressing down, waiting. She lifted the camera again and kept moving. The first building they entered was the gas station. The bell above the door gave a tired jingle, and Karolynn flinched at how loud it sounded in all that silence. Inside, dust filmed the shelves in soft gray layers. Candy wrappers sat untouched, their colors faded like old bruises. Behind the counter, a little radio sat in a puddle of shadow. Otis reached for it instinctively. King caught his wrist. "Don't," King said. Otis blinked. "Why?" King stared at the radio like it was a sleeping animal. "Because it's going to turn on." Karolynn held her breath. Otis pulled his hand back slowly. The radio remained dead. For a moment, Karolynn almost laughed at herself, almost let the tension go. Then the radio crackled. Not music, not static. A voice. Low, distant, and wrong, like it wasn't coming from the speaker at all.
"Keep driving."
Karolynn's stomach dropped. Otis backed away from the counter so fast he knocked into a rack of empty chip bags. They rattled like dry bones. The voice stopped. The radio went silent again. King didn't move, but Karolynn saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. That wasn't... Otis started. Karolynn lifted the camera higher. Her hands were steady, but her pulse wasn't. I got it on tape. Good, King said. Now we leave. They stepped back outside. The fog had thickened while they were inside. Not a gradual shift. Not weather. It was as if someone had pulled a curtain tighter around them. Karolynn panned the camera up the street and froze. Something moved in the haze. Not a person. A shape. Tall and broad and impossibly still, as if the fog had formed itself into a silhouette for a heartbeat. Then it was gone. Karolynn blinked hard and zoomed in on the empty street. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Otis's face had gone pale. No, I didn't see anything." King's eyes stayed locked forward. "I did." Karolynn forced herself to keep walking, filming the town like it was still just a town. Like it wasn't watching them back. They passed a church with its doors open, hymn books scattered across the pews like the congregation had fled mid-song. A wind chime hung from the eaves, tapping softly though there was no wind. Otis stopped at the church steps. "There's something carved here," he said. Karolynn swung the camera down. The stone was gouged deep with fresh marks. "Do not go up the hill." Beneath it, another message, smaller, almost hidden. "It hears you when you run." King's throat bobbed. Otis swallowed hard. "Okay," he said, voice tight. "Okay, so we don't run." Karolynn stared at the church doors. The darkness inside looked thick enough to touch. And somewhere far behind them, down the street they'd come from, metal clinked softly again. Once. Twice. Like a tool being lifted. Karolynn turned slowly, camera raised. The fog shifted. And for the briefest second, the silhouette was there again. Closer. Karolynn didn't say the word run. She didn't even think it. But her body wanted to do it anyway, wanted to bolt down the street and keep going until the fog thinned and the world felt normal again. King stepped in front of her like he could block the town itself. His eyes stayed fixed on the haze behind them, jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped. "Back up," he murmured. Otis didn't move. He was staring at the church steps, at the carved warning, as if the stone might start bleeding. Karolynn swallowed. Her mouth had gone dry. She kept the camera lifted because lowering it felt like surrender. "Okay," she said softly, forcing her voice into that documentary calm. "Okay, we're just going to keep moving, no running." King nodded once. "Stay together." They started walking again. The street narrowed as if the buildings were leaning closer. Fog slid between doorways and alley mouths, threading itself through the town like veins. Karolynn filmed the storefronts as they passed. An antique shop with shattered glass, a barber pole that didn't spin but still looked wet, a diner with chairs pushed in neatly like someone had closed for the night and planned to reopen. A sign above the diner read, "Open 24 hours, Otis slowed beside it, eyes darting. "This is wrong," he whispered. This is staged, like a movie set." Karolynn almost agreed. Then she saw the footprints again. Not barefoot this time. Boot prints. Heavy, deep, fresh, leading into the diner. King saw them too. He lifted a hand, silently signaling stop. Karolynn's camera zoomed in on the prints. The mud in the indentation still glistened, dark and wet. "They're new," she whispered. Otis's breath came faster. "There's no way. No one's been here for decades." King crouched slowly, careful, like sudden movement might snap a wire. He reached out, not touching the print, just hovering his fingers over it as if he could feel the heat. "They're warm," he said. Karolynn's stomach turned. The diner door creaked. Not from wind. From inside. Otis flinched so hard he stumbled backward into Karolynn, bumping her shoulder. The camera jolted, catching a blur of fog and dark windows. "Don't," King hissed. "Don't move like that." Otis's eyes were wide. "I didn't touch it." The door opened a fraction more. A thin line of darkness yawned in the gap, deeper than it should have been. Not a room, not a shadow. A throat. Karolynn couldn't help it. She raised the camera toward the crack, zooming in, trying to force the lens to see what her eyes couldn't. Her screen flickered. For a single frame, the diner interior wasn't empty. For a single frame, someone was standing behind the counter. Tall, broad, still. And then the image skipped and the diner was empty again. Karolynn's breath caught. She lowered the camera just enough to look at King. King had gone pale. Otis whispered, "What did you see?" Karolynn couldn't answer. Not with her throat locked like that. Not with her heart slamming against her ribs. King grabbed her wrist, firm, not painful, and tugged her away from the diner. "We're leaving, now." Otis stumbled after them. "Where are we even going? We came here to film," Karolynn forced out, her voice shaking despite her. "We came to film." King didn't look back. "We filmed enough." They walked faster, not running, never running, but fast enough that Karolynn's camera bobbed and swayed, catching crooked shots of street signs and broken windows and fog that thickened with every step. The town seemed to rearrange itself. A street they'd already passed appeared again ahead. The same tricycle. The same mailbox flag raised. Otis stopped dead. "No," he said, voice cracking. "No, that's not possible. We already..." King spun in a slow circle, scanning, his eyes sharpened with something that wasn't panic. Recognition. "We're looping," he said. Karolynn's hands tightened around the camera. "How?" Otis fumbled his map open again. The paper shook so badly it crackled. This doesn't make sense. The road should be back there. The car should be..." He cut off as the fog shifted beside the antique shop. A narrow alley opened up that hadn't been there a second ago, and something metallic clinked softly from within it. Once, twice, Otis took a step toward the alley without thinking. Karolynn grabbed his sleeve. "Otis, don't." He turned, eyes glassy. "If we can just get around the block, we can find the road. We can..." The alley breathed. Fog poured out of it, thick and heavy, and the temperature dropped so fast Karolynn's skin prickled. King lunged forward. "Otis!" Otis yanked his arm free and stepped into the alley. The fog swallowed him in a single heartbeat. Karolynn surged forward instinctively. King caught her by the shoulders. Don't run in."
I'm not running.
She choked.
Otis.
The alley was empty. No footsteps. No movement. Just fog and darkness pressed between brick walls like a closed fist. Karolynn screamed his name again. Something answered. Not Otis's voice. A low, distant sound, like a chainsaw revving far away, filtered through wet earth. And then a sharp, wet snap from somewhere inside the alley. Karolynn's knees almost gave out. King pulled her back hard. "We're going, now." Karolynn stumbled, camera still filming, tears blurring the screen. Behind them, the fog rolled forward, and on the pavement, right where Otis had been standing, a fresh boot print appeared. Deep, heavy, as if something had just stepped out. Karolynn didn't remember deciding to follow King. One moment she was staring into the alley where Otis had vanished, throat raw from screaming his name, and the next she was stumbling after King through the fog-choked street, her camera still rolling like it had a mind of its own. King moved fast without running, shoulders tight, head swiveling, eyes cutting through the haze as if he could slice it open by force. "Otis." Karolynn tried again, but the word broke in her mouth. King didn't answer. He didn't look back. He just kept going, dragging her forward by sheer momentum. The town shifted around them. Buildings that had been far away now loomed close, their windows dark and watchful. The same cracked street sign appeared twice. The same tricycle sat in two different places, upright, like it was waiting for someone to ride it. Karolynn's camera caught it all. Every impossible repetition, every subtle wrong angle, while her brain tried to pretend it wasn't happening. They passed the diner again. The door was wide open now. Inside, chairs were still pushed in neatly, and on the counter a single mug sat steaming faintly in the gloom. Karolynn's stomach turned. "Don't look," King said, voice low. "I have to," she whispered back and hated herself for it. King stopped so abruptly she nearly crashed into him. He was staring up the street. The fog had thinned there, just enough to reveal something that hadn't been visible before. A hill. Not a gentle rise. A steep incline that shouldn't have fit behind the buildings, like the town had folded itself to make room. And at the top, a house. Karolynn's breath caught so hard it hurt. The house looked wrong in the way nightmares looked wrong. Too tall, too still, too perfectly placed. It sat like a crown on the hill, dark windows staring down through the fog as if it had been waiting for them to notice it. Karolynn hadn't seen it earlier. She was sure she hadn't. "Was that there before?" she asked, voice thin. King's face was slick with sweat despite the cold. "No." Karolynn zoomed in. The camera struggled to focus, jittering slightly as if the lens didn't want to cooperate. For a second, the image blurred, then snapped clear. A porch sagging under rot. A front door painted black. And something hanging from the porch beam, swaying gently. Karolynn's stomach dropped. It wasn't a decoration. It was a wind chime made of metal scraps. Tools, rusty blades, a chain, and one long curved hook that looked too much like a finger. King grabbed her elbow. "We're not going up there." Karolynn didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the house, on the black door, on the fact that it looked like it could open at any moment. From behind them, down the street they'd just come from. Metal clinked softly. Once. Twice. King went still. Karolynn felt it too, the shift in the air, the way the fog seemed to press closer around their bodies like hands. Then the sound came again. Not the clink. Something else. A low, distant revving, deepening slowly, as if whatever made it was waking up. Karolynn's camera shook. King leaned close, voice a harsh whisper. "Do not run." Karolynn's throat tightened. "How do we—" A shape moved in the fog behind them. Tall. Broad. Not walking so much as arriving. Karolynn's blood turned to ice. King shoved her hard toward the hill. "Move." They didn't run. But they moved like people who understood that standing still was death. The fog swallowed the street behind them. And as they climbed, Karolynn realized the worst part wasn't the house. It was the certainty. Deep, instinctive, undeniable. That the house had only appeared because it knew they were ready. Karolynn lost King halfway up the hill. Not because he ran, because the fog decided he wasn't there anymore. 1 second, his shoulder was a dark shape in front of her, his hand reaching back to keep her close. Then the fog thickened like wet cotton and swallowed him whole. "King?" Karolynn rasped. No answer. Only the soft crunch of her own footsteps and the frantic thud of her heart. She turned in a slow circle, camera lifted, filming the fog as if it might give him back if she recorded enough proof. "King, stop," she whispered. "This isn't funny." The wind chime on the porch above them clinked once. Twice. Karolynn froze. The house loomed at the top of the hill, larger than it had been from below. Its windows were blank, but she could feel the weight behind them, attention without eyes. Her camera screen flickered. For a moment, the image warped, bending the house sideways like a reflection in broken glass. Then it corrected. Karolynn swallowed hard and kept moving because standing still felt like giving something time to decide. A sound rose behind her. Not footsteps. A low, distant revving that made her teeth ache. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She reached the porch steps and nearly tripped over something half buried in dead leaves. A boot. Otis's boot. Karolynn's stomach dropped so fast she felt sick. She crouched, fingers shaking, and pulled it free. The leather was smeared with mud and something darker, dried, tacky, too red to be dirt. Karolynn's breath came in shallow bursts. "Otis?" she tried, voice cracking. The fog below the porch shifted. Something tall moved within it. Not rushing. Not hunting like an animal. Approaching like it already owned her. Karolynn backed up onto the porch, camera still rolling, the lens catching the black door inches from her shoulder. She didn't remember stepping that far. The wind chime clinked again, louder now, more insistent, like a warning she was too late to understand. Karolynn's camera glitched. A single frame flashed across the screen. King's face. Blood on his mouth. Eyes wide, not with pain. With terror. Then the image snapped back to the porch. Empty. Silent. Karolynn's hands trembled so hard the camera shook. Behind her, the black door creaked. Just a fraction. As if something inside had heard her breathing. As if it was listening. Waiting. And somewhere in the fog below the porch, the chainsaw sound deepened. Closer now, wet and steady, like lungs filling. Karolynn pressed her palm to the door without thinking. The wood felt warm, alive. King had learned something important the second the fog took him. It didn't move like weather. It moved like a decision. One blink and Karolynn was gone behind him, the hill erased into a wall of gray. King's stomach dropped, but he forced himself not to spin around, not to shout her name, not to do anything sudden that would make the world notice him harder. He stood still. He listened. The town below was muffled, as if someone had shoved cotton into the sky. Even the trees were quiet. No birds, no insects, just that damp, swallowing hush. And underneath it, a low, mechanical breathing. King's hands curled slowly at his sides. He didn't run. He didn't back away. He waited. The fog thinned in front of him for a heartbeat. He saw the porch above, the sagging steps, the black door. And down the slope, emerging from the haze like it had been there the entire time. The dark man. King's brain tried to label it human because humans needed labels to survive, but nothing about it moved right. It didn't stride. It didn't hurry. It simply appeared closer each time King blinked, as if distance was a suggestion. The chainsaw hung at its side. Not carried like a tool. Held like a limb. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't even constant. It rose and fell in slow cycles like breath, King's mouth went dry. He wanted to run so badly his legs trembled. He didn't. The dark man tilted its head. Not curious. Listening. King stared back, forcing his lungs to slow, forcing his fear to become a quiet thing. He thought of the warning carved into stone. It hears you when you run. The dark man took one step. King didn't move. The fog tightened around them, pressing close like a hand over his mouth. King's eyes watered, but he kept them open. The dark man took another step. Closer now. King could smell it. Metal and wet earth and something old, like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. King's vision tunneled. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. He swallowed it down. Stillness, he told himself. Stillness is survival. The dark man stopped. The chainsaw sound lowered, until it was almost nothing at all. Then, impossibly, it turned away, not leaving, not retreating. Simply no longer interested. King's knees nearly buckled. He stayed upright. He stayed silent. Only when the fog loosened, only when he could feel the town breathing again, did he move. He limped toward the porch, one leg burning where something had sliced him earlier. Blood soaked his jeans, warm and sticky, but he didn't look down. He looked up. At the black door. At the thin gap where it had opened. And at Karolynn's camera light flickering weakly through the fog as if she was still there, still filming, still alive. King dragged in a careful breath. "Karolynn," he whispered, barely sound at all. The wind chime clinked once, twice. And somewhere behind him, down the hill, a second sound answered. A choked, ragged cough. Otis. Alive. Karolynn didn't remember crawling. She only remembered the porch boards above her face, splintered and damp, and the black door inches away, open just enough to breathe cold air onto her cheek. She'd wedged herself beneath the porch when the fog surged, squeezing into a space meant for animals and rot. The camera was still in her hands, her fingers cramped around it like it was the only proof she existed. She filmed because stopping felt like dying. Above her, something moved. Not footsteps. Weight. A slow shift of pressure on wood. The wind chime clinked softly, metal on metal, tool against tool, like teeth tapping in the dark. Karolynn held her breath until her lungs burned. The chainsaw sound rose somewhere below the hill, wet and steady. Closer. Closer. Then it stopped. Silence slammed down so hard it felt physical. Karolynn's camera flickered. The screen glitched once, showing the black door fully open for a single frame, revealing only darkness inside, deeper than the house could possibly hold. Then the image snapped back. The door was barely cracked. Nothing changed. Except Karolynn could feel it now. Something inside was listening, waiting for her to make a sound. A thin whisper drifted through the fog. Her throat tightened. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The voice came again, barely there.
Karolynn, it's me.
King. Karolynn squeezed her eyes shut, relief so sharp it hurt. She wriggled backwards, scraping her shoulder on a nail, and slid out from under the porch. King stood in the fog like a ghost that refused to leave. Blood streaked across his mouth and chin. One pant leg was soaked dark, and his hands shook as if his body couldn't decide whether to fight or collapse. "You're alive," he breathed. Karolynn lifted the camera, filming him automatically. "So are you." A ragged cough sounded from down the hill. Otis stumbled out of the haze, hunched like he'd been folded in half and left there. One shoe was missing, his hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat, and his eyes looked too wide for his face. He stopped when he saw them, swaying. For a second, none of them moved. Then Otis laughed, one broken, disbelieving sound. "I thought you were dead," he croaked. Karolynn's eyes stung. "I thought you were dead." King glanced toward the town below. "We leave, now." They didn't argue. They moved together down the hill, not running, never running, but fast enough that their bodies screamed in protest. Karolynn filmed through tears, the footage bobbing and shaking as the fog tore at them like hands. The road appeared suddenly, as if Chainsaw Hill had decided it was done playing. Headlights flared in the distance. A truck. Real, moving, loud. Karolynn's knees almost gave out. They stumbled into the road, waving their arms, choking on breath. The truck slowed, and behind them, at the top of the hill, the fog parted. The house sat perfectly still. The dark man stood on the porch, tall and unmoving, watching them like property that had wandered too far. The chainsaw idled softly at his side, not chasing, just waiting. Karolynn turned her camera toward him for one last second. The image distorted, his silhouette blurred. But the sound, the wet, steady breathing, came through crystal clear. Karolynn lowered the camera and whispered, voice shaking with everything she couldn't scream.
"If anyone finds this,"
she swallowed hard,
"do not come here."
The screen cut to black. A beat of silence. Then, "Welcome to Chainsaw Hill." A chainsaw revved. Not far away. Not close. Just wrong. Like something breathing.